All right. Thank you very much for joining us. This is CSN. You're listening to CSN. This is Common Sense Network, part of the ISI broadcasting system. This is the Jeremiah Gunn Show. Thank you for listening. You're at the Gun Show. Thank you. Thank you. Can't thank you enough. Thank you for listening. We're broadcasting from behind enemy lines to the true patriots and the resistance. We're behind Democrat enemy lines in the Civil War that never ended. And we got a lot to get to, so we got to get going. So what is this about? This is about the secret disservice. It's a secret. But what is the secret? Well, not them. I met one. He was showing a house near me. We were in the market for looking for a house, and the guy was showing his house. It was an open house. And he told us that, I think it was for sale by owner, but he said, I'm a Secret Service agent. And he was nothing to write home about. I mean, he wasn't a Delta Force. He wasn't even Pete Hegseth, just a kind of a soft guy, an accountant or a librarian or something like that. And he told me it wasn't that hard to get the job. Well, the secret is that, here's the secret. If you're ready, they're no good at what they do. They stink. They always have. They're lousy at it. And it's either intentional or not. There's this thing called Gray's Law. It's a corollary of Hanlon's razor. And it basically says that any significantly advanced incompetence is indistinguishable from malice. So does it really matter whether they're no good at what they do or whether they are just evil and trying to do a bad job? Don't matter. So that's the problem. Okay. So this morning I was watching a podcast with Douglas Murray, who I think is great. And the other guy was Aaron McLean. He has a show called War College or something like that. He has a podcast. They're talking about specifically the shooting. They were both at the Correspondents' Dinner at D.C., same Hilton that Reagan was shot at about 50 years ago. And same place. Okay. So you wonder, well, what has 50 years done to our security, especially when it's been 15 months since Butler or whatever it's been? How are they doing? Oh, not so good. Not so good. So they talk about, so when you talk about these guys, Douglas Murray, or you talk about, he's written some great books. I don't know what Aaron has written, but Douglas Murray has written some fantastic books. He's a tremendous social commentator, thinker, probably Oxford educated, whatever. But these guys are great, and they're honorable men. But you don't have to be as well read as them. You don't. You really don't. You don't have to. He references things that these obscure European or Russian writers who write about Russia or whatever. People have coalesced all of these brilliant ideas, so you don't have to get it right from Victor Davis Hanson. You don't have to get it from Douglas Murray, whatever. You get it from me. But do ask yourself, please ask yourself, what does that person that I'm listening to, what do they really know about it? And you can take anybody in the spectrum, from Megyn Kelly, who's a lawyer, or Sean Hannity, or I won't mention the other side, but Rogan. What do they really know what they're talking about? Tucker Carlson, really? What does he really know about what he thinks he knows? Anyway, you don't have to, but you can listen to what they're saying, and if you put in a little bit of work, you can find out whether it's correct or not. So, but Douglas Murray was talking about whether there's an absence of meaning. People don't have meaning in their lives. So these people that are nihilists, the big problem here is it all kind of starts with N. If they're not Nazis, they're nihilists, nepotism, nepo babies, and narcissists. It's narcissism. It's nihilism, which means they don't really believe in anything. And they believe everything is meaningless, except them, except their existence. They're going to be the hero of the euro, and they're going to take somebody out. Their negativity. And then these Nancy ninnies that are running around saying, well, we can't give them the death penalty, and we can't arrest them, and we can't this, and we can't that. And so that's what happens. So Douglas Murray is saying, well, he said there were people screaming at us on the way in. They both went to the Correspondents' Dinner. On the way in, people are screaming at us, "You're baby killers. Trump deserves to die." And they got signs to that same effect, printed by, George Soros Foundation. And they're yelling, screaming, "He's Hitler." Well, of course, if he's Hitler, probably somebody who kills him is a hero. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was involved in the plot to kill Hitler. He was a Lutheran pastor. So do you think if you call somebody Hitler enough times, somebody will say, well, I'll do it. It's just always philosophical statement. Would you kill Hitler as a baby if you know all that? So the same people are screaming. These narcissists, these useful idiots that are have no value to society except to detract, are screaming that you're baby killers, like they yelled at, like Jane Fonda yelled at the Vietnam veterans. I mean, the people coming back from Vietnam. They're coming back from Vietnam, not veterans. You're baby killers. You're Nazis. You're Hitler. You're fascist. They were screaming the same thing on the way out as the room was cleared out. And he says, well, the First Amendment, free speech. No, that's not. That's not. That's not the First Amendment. That's not. That's not what it is. Even you can't yell. This is the biggest problem: is people don't know their job. SCOTUS doesn't know their job. Journalists don't know their job. This is not that hard to figure out. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You can't slander somebody and say, well, that's free speech, like Kimmy Kimmel tried to do. It's not free speech. This was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And same guys on the way in, on the way out, yelling, screaming. Well, the host of the show was, J.D. Vance was there. The whole cabinet was there, it seems like. I don't even think, the vice president is supposed to travel with the president, because what happens? They both get killed. The host of the podcast was a former Marine, and he's a consultant or war college expert or something, and he's expert on security, and he's talking about the security was not good. Not good. They both talked about how after all the shooting and all the chaos, it took forever to get Trump out of there. And even Hegseth, to get him out of there. This was 50 years after Reagan was shot at that same hotel. Same hotel. Okay, so, how is it that, the security wasn't very good? He doesn't have to go to these things. The White House Correspondents' Dinner? They're enemies anyway. They're just propaganda for the left. 90% of them. Anyway, let's talk just a quick walkthrough of assassination history of the United States. I think it's interesting. Aaron Burr was probably the first assassin. He had been VP under Jefferson. He kills Alexander Hamilton, in a duel. Now, Alexander Hamilton was a quintessential founding father. We wouldn't be here without him. He was phenomenal. He couldn't be president because he was born, I think, in Bermuda, one of those islands, near there. Anyway, Aaron Burr, this waste of space, this total self-enamored narcissist, he wound up becoming a traitor. But he takes out this guy on his way out. He was going to get together a bunch of people, and he had a little army like Charles Manson. He was going to get together an army, and he was going to take over because he deserved to be king. He was going to make himself emperor. He was serving as VP to Jefferson, but he thought he should have won that election. So Jefferson had to put a warrant for him, and he had to run around. He met in Ohio with a bunch of people. He's going to take over Mexico in the Southwest and call it Burrington or Burr America or some crap. Okay. So, but this what happens. Nothing happens to him. Around, a little bit later, Andrew Jackson, he was 67 years old. He gets shot by a narcissistic loser. He was a British-born house painter who fired a couple shots at him, almost point blank, and I think the gun malfunctioned, like it did with Squeaky Fromm, and she shot at Gerald Ford in 1975. They're a couple hundred years later. But his 67-year-old Andrew Jackson was pretty bad arse. He beat the guy up with his cane. So then they didn't even have Social Security or Secret Service. So Lincoln, let's talk about Lincoln for a second. He had to be snuck into the White House for his inauguration. He came on a train, but it had to be secret because there were so many plots against him from the day he won or before he won. There were so many plots from the Democrats. His hotbed, Baltimore was a hotbed. It was a snake pit. But they had to go into Baltimore to get him to the White House. Very close. So they decided, that's the first instance, I think Pinkerton came up with this plan. They said he was going to be traveling as an invalid. He had a floppy hat and a shawl and a good 6'4". He was supposed to hunch over, and he had this woman agent with him. That's supposed to be his sister or his nurse or something. And the idea was they were sneaking him in. So they stop in the middle of the night And wee hours of the morning, they disconnect the locomotive and they hook it up to horses so they can drag it into town. Under disguise. The indignity of this because of the Democrats. They had to be snuck in because there were so many death threats against him. He hadn't even been sworn. He should have had a big parade coming into town like he did when his coffin was going back. They should have had some honor and some dignity. Nope. Democrats wanted him, they made him be smuggled in. The only thing they heard in the dark, they turned out all the lights and dragged it with a horse so it wouldn't make any noise. They heard a drunk sitting on the loading, one of the docks of the railway station singing Dixie. And they couldn't keep Lincoln from cracking jokes in the dark because they told him to be quiet, but that's just kind of the guy he was. So there's a plot. So someone even, when he was president, took a shot at him. He was riding a horse or something, and I don't remember whether they knocked his hat off or not, but, this was always a threat, always a concern. And while it was always a concern, he had to have like a volunteer bodyguard. There was this great friend of his. He was a lawyer from Virginia who knew him in Illinois. His name was Ward Hill Layman. He was about 6'4", big. He looked like a football player. You can pull up pictures of him. But he used to sleep outside Lincoln's door. He had knives, pistols, brass knuckles. People kind of joked about him and said, that he was made into a marshal so he could have an official title. And the Marshal Service honored him not long ago in Washington, D.C. You can see that online. Anyway, there were things to be done there. So when the night that the things to be done in Richmond, Virginia, so he was with him all the time. But the war had recently ended, very recently ended, and Lincoln was going to go to Ford's Theater, and he was going to go to Ford's Theater, and this guy was going to be with him. But Lincoln sent him to do some marshal type work in Richmond, Virginia, because there were still things to be mopped up. So he always felt guilty his whole life that he didn't protect Lincoln because that was his whole passion. He was a great friend and a great bodyguard. But so Lincoln, who did he have? What kind of a security detail did he have to go to in Washington, D.C., right near Baltimore? Well, the murderers were plotting not far away. What kind of security do you have? Not much. But so one of the things was he invited Grant. He invited Grant to go along with him. And this is what's weird. Grant was just the commander of the armies. Lincoln was the commander-in-chief. He would have had better security if Grant went with him. So did Grant go with him? No, because Julia Grant, who was the wife of Grant, good people, very good people. Well, Mary Todd Lincoln, his wife, Lincoln's wife, was a witch with a capital B. She had spent all the previous years just tongue lashing both Lincoln and Julia Grant, who was a good woman. But she tongue lashed her and cut her down and cut down Grant and all this stuff. So when he said, "Hey, go ask Grant if he'll go," so Grant says, "Julia, you want to go to Ford's Theater with Lincoln?" Pretty high honor. She says, "I wouldn't go anywhere with that woman." So if you think about it, you could say that Mary killed Lincoln with her tongue. With her tongue. The good book talks about the tongue is just a tiny thing, but it's like a rudder on a ship. A little tiny rudder can control a great big ship. A little tiny flame can start a huge fire, a Holocaust. So, that's kind of a problem. So who did go with him? Who did go with him was this guy named Major Rathbone and his fiancée Clara or something. They were kind of socialites and friends with Lincoln. And so he had a major sitting in there with him. And, that guy spent his whole life guilty over why didn't he protect Lincoln a little better. Well, John Wilkes Booth, when he came in, he had a knife and he slashed at this guy and cut him up pretty good. And the guy just beat himself up the rest of the time. But wasn't there a guard at the door? Yeah, there was. There's a guy named John Frederick Parker. He wasn't a very good military man. He had problems in his record for being a drunk and stuff. So he walks away from his post. I don't know if he would have done anything anyway. He walks away from his post, and he goes to the balcony to watch the play, and then goes to a tavern to have tip back a few. That's what he did instead of protecting Abraham freaking Lincoln. So did he get busted? Did he get any? Well, he got in a little bit of trouble, but they kind of dropped the charges. He had a reputation for being an undisciplined soldier and a drunk and everything else, but they chose him. That's the one we'll put there. That's the Secret Service at work. That was the security detail. How long ago was that? 1865. I can't do that math that fast, but it's 2026, isn't it? 160 something? 160 years? It's not any better? Did that guy get executed or anything? You know what the Romans used to do if you fell asleep on guard duty? You were executed. So they would put more than one guard, so you could, if you liked the guy, you could help keep him awake. Say, hey, dude, we can't go to sleep. This guy wanted to drink more than he wanted to do his job. And the people above him didn't think anymore. So Grant didn't go. Did Grant say, hey, everybody, put some soldiers around that booth, around that box? No. People didn't think this kind of thing happened here. But a Democrat actor, popular actor like Johnny Depp, who said he wanted to kill the president, as did Madonna, as did Maxine Waters, that woman comedian, I can't remember her name, but anyway, she, a horrible looking redhead, she held up a picture. Snoop Dogg did a video of him assassinating Trump. It's just all over the place. So anyway, why is it important? Why is it so important that guys like Lincoln and Trump and JFK not get shot? Because who takes over? Who takes over? Who takes over for J.D. Vance? Is J.D. Vance Trump? No. Was George H.W. Bush Reagan if Reagan had been killed? No. Was LBJ JFK? No. Is Pete Hegseth Stanton? Stanton was the Secretary of War under Lincoln. He rounded up all the conspirators and he hanged them fast as he could, very fast, including, I think, the first woman executed in the country. Her name was Mary Surratt. She ran that little tavern where they met to plot the kidnapping and then assassination. So how did she get hanged? Well, he was an equal opportunity DEI enforcer. He believed in justice. She was just an accomplice. She drove the getaway car. All she did is set up, the meetings and knew they were doing it. There was a gang, which makes you wonder. This is what these guys talked about on the podcast. What if it wasn't some lone whack job? If it was at this Hilton, what if it was Cole Allen or whatever, some half-breed whack job? What fatherless figure, single mother raised? What if it was a bunch of people from ISIS, from IRGC, from Somali gangs? They're right here. They're not across the pond anymore. They're right here. All these terrorists that Democrats like. What if it had been a coordinated effort as these guys are sitting around? Look at a picture of Reagan's assassination, and it's called an assassination whether you die or not. Look at a picture of it. The guys are standing around, and one guy, 10 feet away, he whips out an Uzi from his three-piece suit. They all have three-piece suits, but Hinckley got, well, let me keep going here. The original plan was to kidnap Lincoln, and it kind of makes you wonder, would he have gone along peacefully, or would he have been like Andrew Jackson? I mean, he was a tough dude. I don't know if he would have. The original plan was they were going to kidnap him and say, stop the war, and we'll give you Lincoln back. But what happened was this popular actor, Democrat, racist, but I repeat myself, he goes to the inaugural, and he's standing right there, and he hears Lincoln's speech about charity toward all, malice toward none, and he dares to mention the blacks. And this guy says, that means, and John Wilkes Booth says, that means N-word citizenship. But now, by God, I'll run him through. So he converted from kidnapping to murder, to assassination. And people heard him. He was standing. You can look at a picture of the inaugural, the second inaugural, and he's standing there. They got him circled. So he was very well known, just like the haters today. They're just on PMS, DNC, and CNN, and ABC, Kimmy Kimmel, Colbert, Bear, all these wicked haters of America, not of Trump. That doesn't fly. You can have TDS. You don't have to hate America and the Constitution. Anyway, it makes me wonder if Lincoln had been, kidnapped by these guys, and it was a gang. They went after the rest of the cabinet too. What would Lincoln have done? When they laid him out on the bed at the Peterson home across the street from Ford's Theater, they said, he was laying there dying, and they got a look at him because they had to take his coat off or whatever. He was in good shape. He was a rail splitter. He was a woodsman. He even took off his coat one time when he was visiting the front, and he had a challenge to one of the soldiers to a wood chopping contest, and he did a good job. They could tell how muscular he was. Only 56. Andrew Jackson was 67. I think Lincoln would have fought. I don't think he would have said, "Oh, okay, tell me where I go, tell me what I do. I'm more important than the country." I don't think he would have. But anyway, that's kind of neither here nor there. So who took over? When you shoot somebody like that, who took over? Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson. That's the problem. The Democrats made him take Andrew Johnson as his running mate. They were called the War Democrats, the ones that, this wasn't about North and South. They were in the North. They made him have Democrat generals. They made him have Democrat. Otherwise, he wouldn't get support. He couldn't get it done. So, these narcissist losers taking people out like this, what do you get? What do you get when a popular actor gets rid of the Donald Trump of the time, the Lincoln of the Lincoln? You get Andrew Johnson. He destroyed everything, all the dream. He crushed the dream that Lincoln was building. Ultimately, Martin Luther King's dream. He crushed it. Grant had gotten rid of the KKK. Lincoln had gotten rid of slavery with his life, fortune, and sacred honor, both of them. And what happens? Democrat comes in, undoes it all, and keeps slavery, de facto slavery, for 100 years. So then there's a series of Republican generals, starting with Grant, and then, Grant was great. Grant was a really, really good man. And then Rutherford B. Hayes, another Republican general. And then his VP, James Abram Garfield. He was, the guy was brilliant. There's a documentary right now, I think on Netflix, about him. Death by Electricity or something, I don't know, lightning, something like that. I'm reading the book right now about that. It's just fascinating. He was a great man. You look up and he was good. He was good. He was a very good president. He cared about blacks, slaves. He did things. He was a great president. When you look him up on AI, good old AI, they'll say he wasn't a very good president because he was only in office for like 6 months and then he got shot. Yeah, he got shot by a whack job. Charles Guiteau, he was a narcissist, a nihilist narcissist, and he thought he should be president. Oh, he was crazy, But the GOP, we had nothing but Republicans, and that's why it's symbolized by an elephant. It was called the Grand Old Party, and it was so big that they used an elephant instead of a donkey, which was a jackass, which was named after Andrew Jackass, and they called him Andrew Jackass, stubborn mule, Anyway, Grover Cleveland was the only true, the only Democrat elected during that whole period from Lincoln on. And it was because he was really a Republican. He was a great president. Read a few books about him. Very, very, very good guy. And he skipped 2 terms like Trump did. He was good. He was like Reagan. He was a businessman. He was into business like Trump. And he cared about people. And then came along McKinley, another great general, Republican, shot by a narcissistic loser. And Teddy Roosevelt, another Republican, son of a guy who worked for Lincoln. His father worked for Lincoln, did great things. He got shot. Teddy Roosevelt got shot during a speech, and he begged for restraint on the part of the restrainers, which I think is BS or CS. I think all these guys should be killed. I think that guy the other night, should have been killed because nothing's ever going to happen to him. Oswald's the only one that anything ever happened to. This guy's shooter is named John Schrank, and he shot, I think he shot a 38. But what happens is he had a steel eyeglass case, and he had a 50-page speech that was folded over, and the bullet that slowed the bullet down. But he still got hurt. He was bleeding and everything. But he finished the speech. But I guess he was wearing the first bulletproof vest in history, I guess. But does anybody even know who his VP was? No. Most people don't know who Teddy Roosevelt was. But anyway, he's a staunch Republican, but he was no Teddy Roosevelt. So when these guys just take people out, it's not good. We ought to have more protection. Harry Truman, Midwestern conservative veteran of 2 wars, one as commander-in-chief, one as a captain in the artillery, World War I and II, and then the Korean War. He said at one point when MacArthur wanted to go after China, as he should have in that war, he said, "Yeah, you know what? 3 wars is enough for one person. One person, that's enough." Anyway, there were some Puerto Rican separatists or something that were tried to take him out. That's a great plan. Kill the president so that you can get your free statehood. Yeah, that'll work. Brilliant. They wound up killing a cop, and I think they killed one of the guys in the shootout. The other guy got 29 years. That's the same thing that this guy who shot at Teddy Roosevelt, he got 29 years because the verdict is they're insane, as if that matters. And he died in prison. He died in a mental hospital. Why don't we still have that? Why don't we still have mental hospitals? I mean, Truman, was there any security for Truman? We went to his house. If you ever get a chance to go there, it's in Independence, Missouri. And you can go to his house and walk through it. It's really cool. Very humble guy. But he didn't even have any security after he'd already been shot as president. So after he was president, he didn't have Secret Service with him all the time. People would come up to his house and rip off pieces of the siding as a souvenir. So they put up a fence with a gate, you think? And then the Secret Service moved in at a house across the street. And he had a little bell installed, a little buzzer where he could call for them. What? That was the plan. Secret Service, top notch, all times, henceforth forever. Okay, so even this assassination attempt at Trump, they come. I guess the idea with Truman is they come running if you push the button. Is that the right plan? They're too far away. Too far away. They had to run down the aisles at this event at the Correspondence Center. What? If they had been. Like it was JFK, if they had been on the running boards. When I was a kid, they were always like on the running boards of the car between the shooter and the president. And they usually wore sunglasses, stuff. But if they're running beside it when it slows down. But what's the point of them being too far away to do anything? Too far away is no good. When Hinckley got at Reagan, it was. He shot 6 shots and took out people like James Brady and a cop and a Secret Service guy. The Secret Service, I mean the cop. What stopped Hinckley was a guy from Cleveland, a Union guy, hit him over the head or something. And Reagan before he got shot, he was making a. I saw. I don't know if it was before or after he got shot, but he was making a speech. And some nut job, he looked like he may be a stagehand or a grip or something, electrician, I don't know. He comes up and he breaks something over Reagan's back, like a fluorescent light bulb or a fixture. And then the security comes running. But before that, he grabbed the microphone and started talking, whatever he wanted to get his message out. These people need to have a voice, right? At least the media thinks so. And Reagan looks like, what was that? And then security comes running. Just like they did when Hinckley shot him. They come running. They're too far away to do any good. And Reagan didn't have a bulletproof vest because they said, well, there's a little corridor that's easy to protect and he won't want to have the vest on. It's only going to be a few minutes. Well, it only took a few minutes, did it? I mean, what was Hinckley? Nothing. And by the way, they let him out. He was unrepentant, just like Squeaky Fromm. Unrepentant. They let him out. They let her out in 2009, 2009. They let the other one that shot at Ford, 2007. I don't remember when Hinckley was let out, but why was he let out? This is the law. There's attempted murder. Well, it was attempted murder. If he had succeeded in killing him, it would be murder, but it was just attempted murder. So somebody tries to run your family over deliberately, and your family lives, then it's just attempted murder. Are you kidding? This was the same Hilton that Trump was at 50 years before. Hinckley used a 22, and my wife said a 22. Yeah, but it had explosive bullets because he wanted to have maximum kill. It could have killed Reagan. It came close. But, Reagan, when he was at Ford's Theater, he looked up at Lincoln's private box up there. It's still decorated with banners, bunting, whatever it's called, if you ever go see there. It's interesting. He said, I wonder if I could get shot at even this much later, 80, whatever it was, 100 and whatever years later. I wonder if I could get shot too, 120 years later, with the security that we have. Well, yeah, you could. Trump's been shot at how many times? I'm starting to lose track. One of our greatest president was almost taken out by a narcissistic nut job, nothing. Just a nothing. You wouldn't care ever if that guy lived or died or that he even lived. Now compare that to Reagan or Trump. Or how many times has Trump been shot at? Look at Butler. Oh my God, how fake was that? And they tried to make it seem like it was a DEI issue. They always, the CIA or the deep state, they always have some sort of a cover. It was just a scam. They tried to. There's a meme that says, make no mistake, they didn't fail to protect him, they failed to kill him. You can break that thing down any way you want. This narcissistic loser getting in there on George Soros' payroll, climbing up a ladder, flying a drone around to get an angle using a rangefinder like a golfer would use or a shooter. And then the cop sees him. Hey, there's somebody up there. People said they saw him up there. Told the police. And then, Trump says, well, I don't know what it is that Trump has to say. Well, they did a good job. They did not do a good job. They didn't do a good job at killing him because that looks like what they were trying to do. And he kills a fireman behind the guy. That was an easy shot. And Trump says, well, that sniper was great. He was a White House sniper. We heard he was a county of Pennsylvania, Butler, whatever the county that's called. We heard it was one of those snipers. But that's not how snipers work. And Trump says, Trump has this whole story, it only took him 4 seconds to hear. Well, that's not how snipers work. Usually they're in twos, but if they're alone, they have to have a target already. They don't hear tat, 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 and then turn, line up the shot, and kill the guy. The guy was still shooting when he was shot. There's even stories that a guy had the head shot and said, hey, this doesn't look good. Give me permission to shoot, which is BS. If you got the job, you got permission to shoot. Come on. But, that's going to through. I think they got to Trump. I really do. Congress has a hearing and this woman who's in charge says, well, the roof was sloped. That was our problem. And then what happened with these? There was a more DEI stuff because what happened? Trump, just like at the Correspondents' Dinner, Douglas Murray and this other guy said he was there for like forever, still exposed after all the shooting. Nobody jumps in front of him. What are we doing? What happened in Butler? These little tiny ladies who came up to Trump's belly button, crouched underneath him. That's it. And he's still in the line of fire. And they don't know how many shooters there are. What kind of a scam is this? That's not how snipers work. That you can't go here, tat, 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 and turn. And then look what the Secret Service did. And then they try to cover it up with a story, make it look like it was a DEI thing. There's always some scam to get out of it. I think the CIA told Trump to say these stories or something. And I think they said, you know what? If you don't be good, next time it'll be Don Jr. or we'll get your wife or Barron or her father, just like we got Charlie Kirk. I wonder if any threats are out there. And then all of a sudden, you hear tat, 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 and you're supposed to have you're supposed to have an imperfect field of view and line up the shot and all that stuff. You don't already get there early and look and see and sweep the roofs and. We had the president come to our company, our campus, because we were a mover and shaker. And boy, they check all the roofs. They check everything. They put snipers on the roof. This is just a lie. It's just a lie. Anyway, they said that everybody was at the table forever. Pete Hegseth took forever to get him out. And however they handle it, they're going to be criticized. But they're not handling it well. I'm not that impressed with Kash Patel. I'm really not. I mean, he was there with his wife, and everybody's got a tuxedo, but do they have a plan? And then Caitlin Collins at Beauty, androgynous fool. She goes to this dinner right after he's shot at, and she's asking about Comey, because Comey spelled out with stones like a little girl doing a Facebook TikTok. He spells out 8647. And he's been arrested for that. Yeah, he should have been busted for the first treason that he did. And she says, were you really threatened? Were you really threatened by that? What kind of a question? Why does he have to have her there? Why does he have to get questions like that? I wish Caitlin would get the Dan Rather treatment. You know what happened to him? Somebody thought he was a drug pusher or something, and they beat the hell out of him. They just beat the hell out of him. They kept asking him, what's the frequency? And he didn't know, so they kept beating the hell out. I wish that would happen to her on her way out to her car. And then Trump could ask her, did you feel threatened? What do you think 86 means, Einstein? Why would she even ask a question? She didn't do the research and doesn't know what 86 means? Trump says it's a mafia term. It's a mob term to take him out. We're going to 86 that guy. This is what the head... And she doesn't mention that Comey was the head of the FBI, the treasonous traitor who tried to get Hillary in as head of the FBI. And then he does this. I mean, of course they're going to double down if nothing ever happens to anybody. Again, Oswald's the only one. Comedian Kimmy Kimmel slanders everybody. When Charlie Kirk wasn't even cold. His family's still crying. His little babies and his wife, his new bride. And Kimmy Kimmel's going, yeah, it was a MAGA. Shooter was a MAGA. These are sick people. But, he's supposed to be a comedian? And he falls under that protection. Hey, if comedians aren't safe under the Freedom Amendment, well, you know what? First Amendment, you're not. John Lovitz, who was a real comedian, came from SNL, and he had retired, and he was doing shows or stand-up. But he started talking about Obama. He said, I voted for him twice, but the guy's an AH. He's a rectum. Because he wants half of my money. He wants half of my, and he's a effing AH. He says that on video. Well, the Secret Service went to his house and said, you threatened the president. Really? And this is how we handle this. There was a serial killer named Ted Bundy. And Larry King, this is your government education mediatainment complex. Larry King wanted to interview him, and he was butthurt because he couldn't interview him. Because Ted Bundy requested Dr. James Dobson, who was the head of an evangelical Christian group, but he had a degree in psychology from USC. He's a doctor. And Ted Bundy wanted him to interview him so he could talk about his addiction to pornography and how that led him into being a serial killer. Okay. So Larry King was criticizing. He goes, well, I wouldn't have hired a pastor to interview him. And they said, well, what would you have asked? I would have asked him why he did it. And I want to know why he did it. You know what? You genius. What was your degree in, you rummy? When Ted Turner called you and got you from the radio to TV. What are you talking about? That guy he was dumb as a box of rocks, like Whoopi Goldberg, like Joy Blowhard, like Colbert, like all these people. But if they make heroes out of these people, who's the guy that shot, I don't know, Mangiani or something like that? Luigi Mangione or something? He's a matinee idol, he's a heartthrob. People are celebrating him, just like they did when Charlie Kirk was shot. Well, if the media is going to do that, they should have some complicity. They should be considered enablers to these sick people. Every sick person has enablers, usually, you know? And Douglas Murray made this great point that these people, these Antifa wannabes, performance artists, useless people that want to make themselves seem important. They said they want to die on the barricades. They don't care who put up the barricade. They don't care what it's for. They want to die on the barricade. And the media makes heroes out of these people. So again, what if this hit squad hadn't been some supposedly lone wolf who's mentally ill? What if it had been a hit squad? You know, and if they know that I won't even get killed, I'll just get arrested and maybe get off. You know, they're talking about the guy who shot Charlie Kirk getting off, about the trial being a mistrial and crap like that. You know, if you don't execute them fast, then it's not a deterrent. It's not a deterrent to release them. Certainly not a. How many of these guys are repeat offenders that do these heinous crimes? So, you know, and I always want to talk about what's their motivation. Like Larry King, want to know who cares what their motivation is? Who cares? They said about Squeaky Fromm and the other woman that shot at Ford that they were, even when you look it up in AI Wikipedia, they say it was the radical movements, fringe radical movements of the time, which was environmentalism, feminism. You know, still with us. On October 7th, the useful idiots at Columbia, they just switched from environmental, from climate change to Gaza, to free the Palestinians. That was an easy switch. Greta Thunberg, whatever. When you call somebody a hero, you kind of get people coming out of the woodwork to say, well, yeah, sign me up. You know? And this whole thing about active shooter, I guess, was the guy the other night an active shooter? You know, I was in a high tech company, and you know, big company, and we had to have these environmental health and safety. And Nancy Pants would come around and talk about, we're going to do an active shooter drill. And I said, you know, so I went back to my desk and I looked up, what's an active shooter? And I swear to you, I think they've changed it, but it said 3 or more people shot. So I started imagining you call the police and you say, we have a shooter. Is it an active shooter? What's your address, by the way? It's showing up on their screen, but is it an active shooter? I don't know. What's an active shooter? 3. Well, no, he's only shot one person so far, but he came through the lobby with a gun, several guns. Well, call us when he shoots the 3rd person and we'll get our active shooter squad. You know, at Columbine, the SWAT team was still putting their outfits on while the kids were being murdered and slaughtered. And these devils, you know, they had their manifesto. I guess this guy, Cole Allen, had a manifesto. Who cares? I don't care. A Unabomber, I don't care about your manifesto. Mein Kampf, I don't care. If we're not going to use it to find out that you're a little bit nuts, you know, the parents at Columbine, Klebold and Harris, they were such filthy devils. You know, I think one of the kids was saying, God help me. And he said, God's not going to help you. Just going room to room. And the SWAT team's putting on their outfits out there. Get in there. You know, there was a shooting in a school in Florida where the cop said, well, I don't think I want to go in. It's not safe. Isn't that your job? Isn't that your job? You know, it was a bystander who took down Hinckley. It was a bystander who took down Squeaky Fromm. A bystander. What's wrong with these people? You know, the shooter in one of the school shooters in Florida, his father called the police and said, my son's a sicko. He's talking about doing this. And they said, well, thank you, sir. Call us back if he actually does something. I mean, with all the lawyers crawling around this country, that isn't wrongful death on the part of those poor parents and students. So, I don't know, active shooter. He's an active shooter. Anyway, These two guys had a manifesto, but their parents, Klebold and Harrison, Columbine, they wouldn't go in. Oh, I wouldn't look at my son's laptop. That's his privacy. Really? Well, isn't it my privacy too? If my kid's going to get shot up by this sick bastard, it's not my right to know what's in there. That should be a liability on their part. You know, this anarchy, the narcissism, it's not democracy, is it? Is anarchy democracy? Is anarchy democracy? It's like Mein Kampf, you know? Thanks a lot, neighbor. You didn't do anything. Look at Fort Hood. Because of Islamophobia, we don't do anything about it. Because of the fear of Islamophobia, we have to have a mental case who was a psychiatrist or psychologist at Fort Hood getting paid. He got paid while he was on trial after he killed everybody. A lot of money because he was a major, colonel or something, major, I think. Hassan at Fort Hood, which was a gun-free zone. But he was signaling all this stuff. He was doing PowerPoints, and people said, he was talking about Allah's going to bring vengeance on everybody. And then he goes into this gun-free zone, which is a military base. Figure that one out. He shoots everybody. And they got to call the police because they're a gun-free zone, a military base, an army base. He was in the army. Because of Islamophobia, we can't say anything. You know, my brother was in the Navy, and he went in the bank in the Philippines. He told me, there's a guy sitting in the corner, probably shorts. I think he had shorts, flip-flop, and a wife-beater tank top. And he's holding an M16. That's the security to the bank. I'll bet they don't get robbed too much. But when the governor of California sent the Rodney King riots, he sent the National Guard, California National Guard. They told the media that, don't worry, they don't have any bullets. And the media goes, the National Guard's being deployed in California, but they don't have any bullets. So don't worry, scumbags. How do you think those soldiers felt? I think the media should have been sentenced to go with them. What are you doing? Do you know what you're doing at all? So our military base is a gun-free zone, but because of the fear of Islamophobia, we can't mention it. This guy might be a threat. There was a case in San Bernardino, California, where this couple, Muslims, they took their little toddler daughter, I think she was 2, and gave them to the parents and said, we won't be back. We're going to go shoot up the place where I work. It was a county food inspection office. We're going to shoot everybody there, so take care of our daughter as we go to Allah. Allah in the case means Satan. So, you know what CARE, there's this group called CARE, the Committee on American or Council on American Islamic Relations. They came right out. They ran to the podium. They weren't Muslims. Yes, they were. He came out 21 minutes later. But they ran up there. They weren't Muslims. Watch the defamation. The 9/11 hijackers weren't Muslim. Nobody was a Muslim, right? We can't talk about this. So let's move up quickly to the 60s. We had JFK, 1963. 68, we had Martin Luther King. We had RFK Sr., Robert F. Kennedy, who's in the Trump cabinet after being a lifelong Democrat. His father was killed, and you know who tackled his killer, who was Palestinian, Sirhan. I think he's still in jail. He was Palestinian, and he was tackled by a bystander, a volunteer supporter of RFK, a guy named Roosevelt Greer. He was a football player for the L.A. Rams. He was part of the fearsome foursome. Rosie Greer, they called him. He tackled him. How'd you like that? Little skinny jockey fool. But maybe he was a patsy, just like Oswald was a patsy or whatever. It doesn't really matter, does it? They're still dead. These people that try to figure out the conspiracy. Oh, it was the Rothschilds and the Illuminati working with Skull and Bones at Yale, and it goes all the way back to, Solomon's Temple.